Leroy, when he said, I'm trying to defend my neighborhood, I didn't realize that his neighborhood was the entire planet, because people from Thailand, Japan, the US, Korea, all of them have Leroy in their neighborhood. He's back 1+2 in self-tips, who's trying to get in there and just getting counter hit launch. Thanks very much for dropping the big 3 months. I expected 3 Leroys in top 8. That was my prediction. I was like, that'll be 3. It was wild. I saw this on R Kappa, R Tekken, and R Street Fighter. I saw this on all 3 of them. So it's Julia Leroy, right, for the first match, and then Sako Naoman, which is Minot versus Sakura. Then it's Leroy, then Cammy Jury. Then it's Leroy, Mika Birdie, and then it's Bob Leroy, and then it's Abigail versus Nikali. This picture on the left is really wild. Can you imagine there's a top 8 for Tekken, and like in the top 8, there is 6 of one character. And while there is 6 of one character, everybody is cheering for Bob. Back in Tekken 6, there was a Bob finals at EVO that had people super pissed, right? So to see that instead Bob is like the savior trying to save this top 8 instead of just down wanting it. Like, you know, it's very interesting to see the difference. Mind you, the characters that weren't Leroy in this top 8 were Julia and Kazumi. Those are not weak characters, obviously, but given the state of where the rest of the top 8 was, they were like, we gotta root for him, you know what I mean? And I asked Ulsan why he went Bob instead of Kazumi, and he said, Kazumi is like, you have to play solid, but you can't do that against Leroy. Like, her kit is like worse at playing solid than his. So to beat Leroy, he picked Bob because he wanted to do 50-50s. He said, I don't think I can beat him just trying to match up to him and play Tekken because all of his tools are better than mine. So I'm just going to play Bob and try to do 50-50s and hope I can win. People were cheering for Akuma. I was watching, like, AK picked Akuma, and everybody was like, yeah, like it took him a second, but it was against Leroy, so the crowd is like still cheering for Akuma. You wouldn't have seen it. So interesting, isn't it? And what's funny is, like, I was talking to Rip, and he said, you know, on commentary, I was making a joke about how it was like the top Tanya situation again, and how we tied NRS for the most like characters in a top 8. And then they looked back. There was not 6 Tanyas in top 8 of CEO. There was only 4. We like looked back and we were like, oh no. You know, someone says 3S Chun, but Ricky, was there even 6? The only top 8 that I saw someone post with Chun, there was 5. I said not counting versus games. What's interesting is, on the other hand, for Street Fighter, Sakura was obviously the big talk of the weekend. Not only is it big because she won the tournament, but like because she is not a super powerful character. In fact, if you look at winner side top 8, the strongest character out of all of these is probably Cammy. None of these characters are that wild. There's no top 5 characters. Cammy is probably top 10. And then in loser side, these are the 2 powerhouse characters here probably, right? Nikali and Abigail. Because Birdie's a bit worse. Mika's a bit worse, about the same. Honestly, I'm very surprised because, you know, Leroy, as powerful as a character as he is, I didn't expect that many people were going to pick him. It's not the power of the character, it was whether people would switch to him before the tournament. And like everybody did. Like so many really good players switched to Leroy. It's not just like all these people who never heard of in your life are making top 8 with Leroy. It's like most of the really good players switched to Leroy, and we're just smoking people with them. It's a reason it took a while for us to see Akuma and maybe Geese succeed as much, as those characters took time and effort and execution. And then Leroy, like, people just picked them up and boom, immediate. He plays like a lot of other Tekken characters. You just orbital heal, you do the down forward 1, back 1+2, like you do all these things, and it is very good. Every player I asked at EVO Japan, how's it going? Who did you lose to? They never even said a name. Everybody said Leroy. I'm standing there next to the stream station. The stream station's probably like 10 feet away. And somebody comes up to me. I was like, hi, how's the tournament going? How you doing? And they're like, man, it's fucked up. This tournament is brutal. I'm unhappy with the way this is. It's an embarrassment how powerful Leroy is. He is such a fucked up character, and like he's made the event such a shit show, and we all feel so bad about it. And if you're not using him, you're just going to lose. He is way too powerful, right? And I was just kind of nodding. And 5 feet from me, unbeknownst to this person standing there, is Michael Murray. He's wearing a mask. And I just see, as this conversation is going on, I just see out of the corner of my eye, Michael Murray just goes and looks back and like looks at who was saying it, and just like, he's just like, ah. He looks back at the match. Seeing his reaction, I could just feel it. He's like, ah. But he's the guy. He's the guy who's got to do all this, deal with all this stuff. And I was like, whew, okay, all right. And I think it's pretty clear that, you know, regardless of the results, everybody knew Leroy was really powerful, probably the best character in the game. And this is one of the few times where I think the results of the tournament are just like, man, look at this fucking character. Even though Leroy is obviously doing Leroy stuff, the top 8 was still really fun to watch. You know what I mean? Like, even though there were 6 Leroys in top 8, I think that there was a lot of really exciting moments in it, and it could have been way worse. And I think, like, Steve and Rip did a good job of selling Leroy as, like, the villain, but then also at the same time building up this interesting story of like, oh my god, can anybody stop Leroy? Like, who's gonna do it? If Steve and Rip can sell a top 8 with 6 Leroys, they are really doing their jobs correctly, huh? He's defending his neighborhood, bro. I don't know what to tell you. His neighborhood just happens to be the planet Earth. He's about the Ultron initiative, you know? It's gotta be a cane surrounding the world. There's one bad tournament, all of a sudden, this is how it goes, huh? Everybody's like, I don't want to play Tekken anymore. I'm playing Street Fighter. It's like, what? How did this happen so fast? These people don't play fighting games. Well, that's true. But at the same time, it's just the perspective is so interesting. For me, it doesn't change much. I expect that before the next big tournament or around the next big tournament, Leroy's going to get nerfed anyway. It just cracks me up, man. Buff everybody else to be Leroy's level. This season of Tekken is already pretty wild, right? They increase damage and walk area across the board, so like mad characters hit real hard anyway. You just have to laugh at it. It's so funny to like look at the internet's perspective on it versus like the actual perspective. In both cases, for both of these games, right, they just had these humongous brackets. Like Street Fighter just had a 1,500 man bracket, and Tekken just had a 1,000 man bracket. This year, I'm sure their Evo numbers are gonna be fantastic. And people are still very excited for these games, like locally, domestically, internationally. Like these games still have a lot of life in them, but the perspective is the interesting part.